Welcome. You are safe here. This is your time to relax, to let go of the day, and to drift into a world of myth, legend, and forgotten history. Let your mind settle, your breathing slow, and allow yourself to be transported to a time before the gods, before Olympus, before even the first whispers of mortal civilization. This is the story of the Titans, the primal beings, who shaped the cosmos, who ruled in an age before Zeus, before mankind, before time as we know it. Their story is one of power and betrayal, creation and destruction, a war that shook the very foundation of existence. Let the sound of my voice guide you through the ancient past, to a world of towering beings, celestial battles, and forces beyond mortal comprehension. There is nothing you need to do right now except listen, drift, and let the story unfold around you. As you sink into relaxation, let the weight of the present fade. Imagine yourself standing beneath a vast and endless sky, where the stars burn with the memory of the past. The Titans were here long before the gods, and perhaps, in some way, they still remain. Now, take a deep breath, and let us begin. Long before Zeus ruled from Mount Olympus, before mortals roamed the earth, before even time itself seemed to take shape, there were the Titans. Their story is one of creation and chaos, power and downfall, a tale lost in the depths of mythology. Unlike the Olympian gods, who would later dominate Greek legend, the Titans were ancient primal forces beings as vast as the sky, as deep as the sea, and as immovable as the mountains. To understand the Titans, we must go back to the very beginning, when the cosmos was nothing but swirling darkness, an endless void known as chaos. From this emptiness came the first primordial beings, vast, unknowable forces that would shape the world. Gaia, the earth, emerged from the shadows, the mother of all life, her body forming the land upon which all things would walk. Above her, stretching into infinity, was Uranus, the sky, her counterpart and consort. The two became bound in an eternal embrace, forming the heavens and the earth, setting the stage for everything that would come after. Together, Gaia and Uranus brought forth their children, the Titans, a race of 12 mighty beings who embodied the raw elements of existence. Kronos, the youngest and most cunning of them all, would one day shape the fate of gods and mortals alike. Alongside him were his brothers and sisters, each representing a different force of nature. There was Oceanus, the boundless waters; Hyperion, the light of the heavens; Cous, the intelligence of the cosmos; and Iapetus, the forger of destiny. Among the sisters stood Rhea, the mother of future gods; Theia, the goddess of sight and brilliance; and Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory, whose name would be whispered through time itself. But not all their children would bring harmony. Gaia and Uranus bore other offspring, beings of great power and terrible form, the monstrous Cyclopes, with their single, all-seeing eye, and the Hecatoncheires, titanic beings with 100 arms and 50 heads, beings of immense strength and chaos. These creatures, feared even by the Titans, were hidden away by Uranus deep beneath the earth, locked away in the depths of Tartarus, the abyss from which no one could escape. Yet Gaia, the Great Mother, was not pleased. She loved all her children, and she could not bear to see them imprisoned. A storm was coming, a rebellion that would shake the heavens and break the chains of fate itself. Uranus, the mighty sky, feared the power of his own children. He ruled with cold detachment, distant and unyielding, keeping his offspring under his dominion. But the Titans, powerful and restless, were not meant to be caged. Gaia, sensing the injustice of her husband's rule, whispered to her children in secret, "One of you must rise against him. One of you must take the throne." Only one had the courage, the ambition, and the ruthless cunning to do what needed to be done. Kronos, youngest of the Titans, stepped forward. With Gaia's guidance, he would overthrow his father and change the course of history forever. A plan was set in motion, and the balance of power in the cosmos was about to shift. As the night stretched across the sky, as the stars bore silent witness, Kronos prepared for his moment, the moment when the reign of the Titans would begin. The weight of the heavens pressed down upon the earth, unyielding and vast. Uranus, the mighty sky, remained high above, a relentless force keeping his children subdued beneath him. Gaia, their mother, watched in silent sorrow. She had given birth to the Titans, the Cyclopes, and the monstrous Hecatoncheires, yet her own husband had turned against them, fearing their strength. He had cast the Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires into the deepest pits of Tartarus, where their cries could not reach the surface. But Gaia could hear them. She could feel their torment in the very bones of the earth. And so, she made a decision, one that would set the course of history in motion. She would not let Uranus rule unchallenged. He would be overthrown. She whispered to her children, the mighty Titans, urging them to stand against their father. Yet none dared to move. Uranus was vast, eternal, an unshakable force that no one had ever dared to defy. Only one among them had the ambition, the courage, and the hunger for power. Kronos, the youngest of the Titans. He was clever, bold, and unburdened by fear. He listened to Gaia's plan, feeling the weight of destiny settling upon him. His mother crafted for him a great sickle, sharp as the first dawn, forged from the very bones of the earth. With this weapon, he would bring down the sky itself. The night was deep when Uranus descended to the earth, as he had done countless times before, unaware of the treachery unfolding beneath him. The moment he lowered himself to embrace Gaia, Kronos struck. With a swift and merciless swing, the sickle tore through the heavens, rending Uranus apart. His cries echoed through the void, shaking the foundations of the cosmos. The sky bled, and from this divine wound, something strange was born. The drops of Uranus's spilled essence fell upon the earth and the sea, giving rise to new and powerful beings, the vengeful Furies, the mighty giants, and, from the ocean's depths, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Defeated and broken, Uranus withdrew, retreating to the farthest reaches of the sky, never to rule again. The Titans had won. Kronos had claimed his throne, but as Uranus faded, he spoke one final prophecy, a curse upon his traitorous son. You too will be overthrown by your own child. Kronos, victorious but uneasy, cast aside his father's warning. He had no equal now. The Titans ruled the cosmos, and under his reign, a new era had begun. Yet deep within the abyss of Tartarus, the imprisoned Cyclopes and Hecatoncheires remained, waiting, and Kronos would make the same mistake as his father before him. The cycle was not yet broken. With Uranus defeated, Kronos declared himself the new ruler of the cosmos. The Titans, now free from their father's tyranny, celebrated their victory, and Kronos took his sister Rhea as his queen. Together they would rule over a world that stretched from the highest peaks to the deepest seas, unchallenged by gods or mortals. This was the age of the Titans, a time when these mighty beings reigned supreme over the heavens and the earth. Each Titan took their domain. Oceanus ruled the endless rivers and seas. Hyperion commanded the celestial light, and Themis, the Titaness of divine law, upheld the natural order. But despite his triumph, Kronos was not at peace. The prophecy of his father haunted him. One day, one of his own children would rise against him, just as he had done to Uranus. He could not allow that to happen. So when Rhea bore him their first child, a son named Hestia, Kronos did the unthinkable. He swallowed her whole. The other Titans recoiled in horror, but Kronos would not waver. When Demeter was born, he swallowed her as well. Then Hera, then Hades, then Poseidon. One by one, his own children vanished into the darkness of his stomach, sealed away before they could grow strong enough to challenge him. Rhea, his queen, watched in despair. She had loved Kronos, but now she saw him for what he had become, a ruler consumed by fear, a tyrant as cruel as the father he had overthrown. When she bore her final child, she could not allow this fate to continue. In secret, she fled deep into the earth, where she gave birth to her youngest son, a child named Zeus. She wrapped a stone in swaddling cloth and presented it to Kronos, who, blinded by paranoia, swallowed it without hesitation. He never suspected the deception. Meanwhile, Zeus was hidden away, raised in secret, destined to fulfill the prophecy that Kronos had tried so desperately to escape. The cycle of betrayal was about to repeat once more. Far from the reach of Kronos, hidden deep within a secret cave on the sacred island of Crete, the infant Zeus grew in secret. Rhea, his mother, had entrusted him to the care of Gaia, the great Earth Mother, who swore to protect him. She placed him in the hands of the nymphs of Mount Ida, who nourished him with the milk of the divine goat Amalthea. To mask his cries, a group of fierce warriors known as the Curetes clashed their shields and spears, ensuring that Kronos would never hear the child who had been foretold to overthrow him. Zeus grew strong and wise, his destiny written in the stars. He learned the secrets of the cosmos, the art of war, and the power of the elements. He was not just another Titan, but something greater, something that would change the world forever. As he reached adulthood, Gaia and Rhea came to him, revealing the truth of his birth. His brothers and sisters still lived trapped inside Kronos, waiting to be freed. Zeus knew then that his time had come. He could no longer remain in hiding. The prophecy had to be fulfilled. With Gaia's guidance, Zeus sought out Metis, the Titaness of wisdom, who knew the ways of both gods and Titans. She crafted a potion, one that would force Kronos to vomit up the children he had swallowed. Armed with this plan, Zeus disguised himself and approached his father, pretending to be nothing more than a humble servant. He poured the potion into Kronos' drink, and as soon as it took effect, the great Titan convulsed. One by one, the gods were freed. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon, reborn from the darkness into the light. Though they had been trapped for years, their divine power had not been weakened. But Zeus knew that freeing his siblings was only the beginning. Kronos would not yield his throne so easily. The Titans would not surrender their rule without a fight. A war was coming, one that would shake the very foundations of existence. The battle for supremacy had begun. The heavens trembled as war erupted between the old order and the new. On one side stood the Titans, led by Kronos, determined to hold on to the power they had ruled with for eons. On the other stood the Olympian gods, young and filled with divine fury, led by Zeus. This was the Titanomachy, a cosmic war that would decide the fate of creation. For 10 years, the battle raged across the skies, the land, and the depths of Tartarus. The Titans fought with overwhelming strength, shaking the earth with every strike. They hurled mountains, shattered valleys, and sent roaring tempests across the sea. Kronos, towering and terrible, wielded his great scythe, the same weapon he had used to overthrow his own father. But the gods were not without power. Zeus, armed with his growing mastery over the storms, hurled bolts of lightning that split the heavens apart. Poseidon raised tidal waves that swallowed entire battlefields, while Hades called upon the darkness, striking fear into the hearts of the enemy. Yet, despite their might, the young gods struggled. The Titans were ancient, their strength unmatched. It seemed as though history would repeat itself, as Kronos had done to Uranus before. The gods needed an advantage, a force powerful enough to turn the tide of war. Zeus remembered the prisoners of Tartarusta Cyclopes and the Hecatoncheires, the monstrous children of Gaia, whom Kronos had imprisoned just as Uranus had before him. He descended into the abyss, braving the deepest pits of existence, and freed them from their chains. The Cyclopes, in gratitude, forged mighty weapons for the gods. They gave Zeus his ultimate weapon, the thunderbolt, a divine force of destruction and creation. Poseidon was gifted the trident, capable of shattering the earth and commanding the seas. Hades was given the helm of invisibility, allowing him to move unseen, striking fear into his enemies. With their new weapons, the gods returned to the battlefield, their power now unmatched. The final battle was upon them. The final battle of the Titanomachy raged across the cosmos, shaking the very fabric of creation. The sky blazed with lightning. The earth cracked open beneath the weight of clashing titanic forces, and the sea churned with fury as Poseidon struck with his mighty trident. Kronos, towering above his enemies, swung his great scythe in blind fury. But the tides of war had shifted. The gods, armed with their new divine weapons, struck back with relentless force. Zeus, now wielding his thunderbolts, became a storm incarnate. Every time he raised his hand, the heavens roared with fire, and the sky burned with celestial wrath. His lightning bolts struck down Titans one by one, forcing them to retreat. Poseidon commanded the oceans, sending tidal waves crashing upon the Titans' forces, drowning entire battlefields. Hades, now invisible with his helm, moved through the enemy ranks unseen, striking down their mightiest warriors before they could react. The gods fought as a unified force, no longer just scattered children seeking vengeance. They were the new rulers of existence, and they would not be denied their throne. The Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants freed by Zeus, unleashed their full fury upon the battlefield. They hurled mountains, crushed legions of Titans with a single blow, and struck fear into the hearts of even the most powerful among them. The Titans, mighty and eternal as they were, could not hold back the inevitable. One by one, they fell. Some fled into the wilderness, vanishing into obscurity, while others stood their ground and faced their doom. At last, Kronos himself stood before Zeus. The king of the Titans, once the most feared force in existence, now faced his own son, the child he had tried to destroy. But fate could not be avoided. With a final blinding bolt of lightning, Zeus struck Kronos down. The heavens split apart as the last remnants of the old order crumbled. The war was over. The reign of the Titans had come to an end. But Zeus would not grant them mercy. The surviving Titans, including Kronos, were cast into the depths of Tartarus, a prison so deep that even light could not reach its walls. There they would remain for eternity, trapped beneath unbreakable chains, guarded by the monstrous Hecatoncheires they had once imprisoned. With the Titans defeated, the world stood still. The chaos had ended, and a new era had begun. The age of the gods had arrived. With the Titans imprisoned, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades gathered upon the highest peak of the world, where they would decide the fate of creation. They stood upon Mount Olympus, a place destined to become the throne of the gods, and divided the universe among themselves. Zeus, as the mightiest of them all, claimed the sky as his domain, becoming the ruler of gods and mortals alike. From this moment on, he would reign as the king of Olympus, the wielder of thunder, the bringer of storms, and the supreme lawgiver. Poseidon, the great lord of the seas, took dominion over the oceans, controlling the tides and commanding the creatures that dwelled within the depths. The rivers, the lakes, and the great endless waters would all bow to him. Hades, the most solemn and mysterious of the three, claimed the underworld, the realm of the dead. It would be his duty to rule over the spirits of the departed, to guard the gates of the afterlife, and to ensure that no soul could escape its destined fate. Thus, the world was divided, and a new order was established. The remaining gods, freed from Kronos' stomach, took their places upon Olympus. Hera, the queen of marriage and family, became Zeus's wife and queen of the heavens. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, would oversee the cycles of life and growth. Hestia, the kindest of them all, would tend the sacred flames of Olympus, ensuring that warmth and home were always honored. Yet, though the Titans were defeated, the world was far from at peace. The earth still carried scars from the war, and many of the ancient beings who had existed before the gods still roamed freely. Giants lurked in the shadows, spirits of vengeance whispered through the winds, and creatures of chaos still stirred in the depths. The gods had won their war, but their rule was just beginning. Their true test was yet to come. Though Zeus and his siblings had secured their thrones, the gods were still young, and their rule was not without conflict. Even among themselves, rivalries and jealousies began to emerge. Zeus, now the supreme ruler of Olympus, took many lovers goddesses, nymphs, and even mortal women. From these unions, the next generation of gods and heroes was born, each destined to play a role in shaping the world. Among his firstborn was Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war, who emerged fully grown from Zeus's forehead after he swallowed her mother Metis, to prevent another prophecy from coming true. Athena became Zeus's most trusted advisor, embodying strategy, intelligence, and divine justice. Then came Apollo and Artemis, twin deities of light and hunt. Apollo, the radiant god of the sun, music, and prophecy, would become one of the most beloved of all gods, while Artemis, the fierce and untamed huntress, would rule over the wilderness, protecting the forests and wild creatures. Ares, the god of war, was born from the union of Zeus and Hera. Unlike Athena, who embodied strategic warfare, Ares represented bloodlust, chaos, and the brutality of battle. His thirst for conflict would lead to many clashes among the gods. Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty, had already emerged from the sea during the fall of Uranus. Yet now she took her place among the gods, influencing both mortals and immortals alike with her irresistible charm. But not all of Zeus's children would be gods. Some would be heroes, born from unions with mortal women demigods, whose fates would shape the course of human history. The seeds of the great myths were being sown, and the world of mortals and gods alike would soon intertwine. As Olympus flourished, challenges remained. Not all the Titans had been cast into Tartarus. Some, like Prometheus, had chosen a different path, a path that would bring them into conflict with Zeus himself. The gods had claimed their thrones, but the story of the Titans was not yet over. Zeus's vengeance did not stop with Prometheus. He had punished the Titan, but he had not forgotten humanity, the creatures who had so eagerly accepted the stolen fire. He would teach them a lesson as well, one they would never forget. From the forge of Hephaestus, a new creation was born. Not a god, not a Titan, but something entirely different. Something designed as both a gift and a curse. Her name was Pandora. She was the first woman, crafted with beauty that rivaled the goddesses themselves. Each Olympian gave her a gift. Aphrodite gave her charm and grace. Athena gave her wisdom and skill. Hermes gave her speech and cunning. But there was one final gift, one that would shape the destiny of all mortals. A box, a simple, unassuming container, sealed and locked, containing all the evils of the world. Zeus gave Pandora to Prometheus, the foolish brother of Prometheus, as a bride. Though Prometheus had warned him never to accept gifts from the gods, Prometheus could not resist. He welcomed Pandora into his home, unaware of the fate that was about to unfold. Curiosity burned within Pandora's heart. The box called to her, whispering secrets, tempting her with the unknown. She resisted, but only for a time. One day, she lifted the lid. From within, a storm of darkness and suffering erupted. Plague, famine, war, pain, sickness, death, all the curses that had never before touched humanity, spilled forth into the world. The Golden Age ended in an instant. In horror, Pandora slammed the lid shut, but it was too late. The evils had already escaped, scattering to the farthest reaches of the earth. Mankind would never know peace again. Yet within the box, one final thing remained. Something small, something fragile, something that had not yet flown away. Hope. With trembling hands, Pandora opened the lid once more, and hope emerged into the world, the only light left to balance the darkness. Though mankind would now suffer, they would also endure. They would fight, they would rise, they would build, and they would love despite all the hardships that had been unleashed upon them. Zeus had sought to punish humanity, but he had also given them something far greater. In their struggle, they would find their strength. And so the world of mortals was forever changed. Zeus was not one to forgive treachery. He summoned Prometheus before the gods and demanded an explanation. But the Titan did not beg for mercy. He stood tall, unshaken, and refused to regret his actions. "I have given them fire," Prometheus said, "because they deserve more than the darkness you left them in." Zeus, cold and unyielding, sentenced him to a torment beyond imagining. Prometheus was chained to the peak of Mount Caucasus, a lonely, desolate place where no mortal could reach him. Hephaestus, though reluctant, was ordered to forge unbreakable chains that would bind the Titan for all eternity. And as the final insult, Zeus sent forth an eagle, monstrous and relentless, to tear into Prometheus's flesh every day, devouring his liver only for it to regenerate overnight, ensuring that the suffering would never end. For centuries, Prometheus endured. Day after day, the eagle returned, its talons ripping into his flesh, its beak consuming him piece by piece. Yet, he did not scream, did not beg, did not yield. He remained defiant, unbroken and unbowed. Even bound in torment, Prometheus knew something that Zeus did not. He knew that the gods were not invincible, that their rule was not absolute. He knew a secret that could one day bring about Zeus's downfall. But he kept his silence, waiting, and one day a hero would come to set him free. The war of the Titans had ended, but the age of the gods had only begun. From this moment forward, gods and mortals would walk the earth together, sometimes as allies, sometimes as enemies, always intertwined. The Olympians ruled from the heights of Mount Olympus, watching over mankind, shaping their destinies, and playing their endless games. But the story of the Titans was not over. There were still those who had not forgotten the old ways, those who lurked in the shadows, waiting for the moment when the gods would falter. And far below, in the depths of Tartarus, something stirred. The greatest challenge to Zeus's reign was yet to come. Though Zeus had secured his throne and the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, not all of the old powers had been defeated. Deep within the earth, Gaia, the primordial mother, still raged against the gods. She had once helped Zeus overthrow Kronos, but now she saw him as just another tyrant, no different from his father. She would not allow this new order to stand unchallenged. In the dark depths of the world, Gaia began to stir, her voice echoing across the mountains and valleys. She called forth her most fearsome children, the giants. These were not ordinary beings, but massive, monstrous warriors, each born of the earth itself. They towered over the tallest mountains, their strength unmatched by any mortal or god. They had only one purpose: to overthrow the Olympians. Armed with spears made from unbreakable stone and clad in armor forged from the bones of the earth, the giants rose from their slumber. Their leader, the monstrous Alcyoneus, was so powerful that he could not be killed as long as he stood upon his homeland. Porphyrion, the mightiest among them, swore that he would tear Zeus from his throne with his own hands. The gods looked down from Olympus and saw the earth tremble beneath the weight of the awakening giants. The war was not over. A new battle had begun. Though Zeus had secured his throne and the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, not all of the old powers had been defeated. Deep within the earth, Gaia, the primordial mother, still raged against the gods. She had once helped Zeus overthrow Kronos, but now she saw him as just another tyrant, no different from his father. She would not allow this new order to stand unchallenged. In the dark depths of the world, Gaia began to stir, her voice echoing across the mountains and valleys. She called forth her most fearsome children, the giants. These were not ordinary beings, but massive, monstrous warriors, each born of the earth itself. They towered over the tallest mountains, their strength unmatched by any mortal or god. They had only one purpose: to overthrow the Olympians. Armed with spears made from unbreakable stone and clad in armor forged from the bones of the earth, the giants rose from their slumber. Their leader, the monstrous Alcyoneus, was so powerful that he could not be killed as long as he stood upon his homeland. Porphyrion, the mightiest among them, swore that he would tear Zeus from his throne with his own hands. The gods looked down from Olympus and saw the earth tremble beneath the weight of the awakening giants. The war was not over. A new battle had begun. The battle between the gods and the giants, the Gigantomachy, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a war that shook the heavens, a war that would decide the fate of Olympus itself. The giants, massive and filled with rage, stormed the gates of Olympus, hurling entire mountains at the gods. The sky darkened as Zeus unleashed his lightning, but the giants were not like the Titans. They were stronger, fueled by Gaia's fury. No god could defeat them alone. It was then that a prophecy was revealed. The gods could not defeat the giants without the help of a mortal. Zeus, realizing the truth of the prophecy, turned his gaze toward the world of men. Among the mortals, he sought a warrior strong enough to fight alongside the gods. He found his answer in the hero Heracles. Born of both god and man, Heracles was unlike any mortal before him. His strength rivaled that of the gods, and his courage was unmatched. Armed with a mighty bow, he joined the battle, fighting side by side with the Olympians. The war raged across the world. Poseidon crushed giants beneath the waves. Athena struck down their greatest champions, and Hades opened the gates of the underworld, pulling the fallen giants into eternal darkness. But it was Heracles who turned the tide of war. One by one he struck them down, piercing their stone-like skin with arrows tipped in Hydra's poison. Even Alcyoneus, who could not be slain upon his homeland, was dragged beyond his borders and killed by Heracles' hand. At last, after a battle that had raged across the earth and sky, the final giant fell. Their rebellion was crushed. Olympus had triumphed once more. But Gaia was not done. There was one more force left, one last monster more powerful than the Titans and the giants combined. In the depths of Tartarus, Typhon was awakening. The battle between the gods and the giants, the Gigantomachy, was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a war that shook the heavens, a war that would decide the fate of Olympus itself. The giants, massive and filled with rage, stormed the gates of Olympus, hurling entire mountains at the gods. The sky darkened as Zeus unleashed his lightning. But the giants were not like the Titans. They were stronger, fueled by Gaia's fury. No god could defeat them alone. It was then that a prophecy was revealed. The gods could not defeat the giants without the help of a mortal. Zeus, realizing the truth of the prophecy, turned his gaze toward the world of men. Among the mortals, he sought a warrior strong enough to fight alongside the gods. He found his answer in the hero Heracles. Born of both god and man, Heracles was unlike any mortal before him. His strength rivaled that of the gods, and his courage was unmatched. Armed with a mighty bow, he joined the battle, fighting side by side with the Olympians. The war raged across the world. Poseidon crushed giants beneath the waves. Athena struck down their greatest champions, and Hades opened the gates of the underworld, pulling the fallen giants into eternal darkness. But it was Heracles who turned the tide of war. One by one, he struck them down, piercing their stone-like skin with arrows tipped in Hydra's poison. Even Alcyoneus, who could not be slain upon his homeland, was dragged beyond his borders and killed by Heracles' hand. At last, after a battle that had raged across the earth and sky, the final giant fell. Their rebellion was crushed. Olympus had triumphed once more, but Gaia was not done. There was one more force left, one last monster more powerful than the Titans and the giants combined. In the depths of Tartarus, Typhon was awakening. The gods had faced many enemies before, but none like Typhon. His power was beyond comprehension, a storm of fire and chaos that consumed everything in its path. As he approached Olympus, the gods fled in terror. Even mighty Poseidon, swift Hermes, and wise Athena abandoned their thrones, retreating into hiding. Only Zeus remained, standing alone against the monster. With a single roar, Typhon unleashed a hurricane of destruction. Mountains crumbled, rivers boiled, and the sky itself seemed to burn. Zeus hurled his thunderbolts, each strike shaking the cosmos, but Typhon did not fall. He caught the lightning in his hands, laughing as he crushed it into dust. The battle raged across the world, from the heights of Olympus to the depths of the earth. Typhon's strength was unmatched, his fury unstoppable. He tore the sinews from Zeus's body, breaking his godly form, and cast him down into a cavern, imprisoning the king of the gods. For the first time in history, Zeus had fallen. Olympus was silent. The gods watched in despair, believing all was lost. But Zeus was not yet defeated. From his prison, he called upon his divine essence, drawing power from the very core of the sky. With newfound strength, he broke free from his chains and rose once more to face Typhon. the final battle had begun. With all his might, Zeus unleashed a storm greater than any before. Lightning fell in torrents, striking Typhon with relentless fury. The very heavens turned against the monster, winds tearing at his wings, fire consuming his form. At last, with a final world-shattering bolt of lightning, Zeus struck Typhon down. The monster roared in agony as he fell, his body crashing into the earth. But Zeus did not stop there. He took the remains of Typhon and buried him beneath Mount Etna, sealing him beneath the earth forever. To this day, it is said that when Mount Etna erupts, it is the breath of Typhon, still raging in his prison beneath the world. The greatest battle of the gods had ended. The reign of Olympus was secure. But the story of the Titans, the gods, and the world they shaped was far from over. With Typhon buried beneath Mount Etna, the reign of the gods was finally secure. Zeus stood victorious, having overcome the last and greatest threat to his rule. The Titans had been vanquished, the giants defeated, and now, even the most fearsome monster in existence had fallen. Yet, though Olympus reigned supreme, the world was forever changed. The scars of the Titanomachy, the Gigantomachy, and the battle against Typhon remained etched into the land. The mountains that had been thrown, the rivers that had boiled, and the very sky that had burned, all bore the marks of these celestial wars. The gods had established their dominion, but their rule would not be without conflict. For though the Titans were imprisoned in Tartarus, their legacy lived on. Some Titans, though spared from eternal punishment, remained bitter and vengeful. Among them was Atlas, who had fought fiercely against Zeus in the Titanomachy. As punishment for his defiance, Zeus condemned him to an eternal burdento holed up the sky upon his shoulders, never to be freed. Prometheus remained bound to the Caucasus Mountains, his body torn apart each day by the relentless eagle. Yet, even in suffering, he knew that his fate was not sealed. A savior would come, one who would break his chains. But the true legacy of the Titans lay not in their imprisonment or their punishment. It lay in their children. For though Zeus had defeated his father Kronos, the blood of the Titans still ran through the veins of many beings yet to come. The old world had ended, but a new age had begun, an age where gods and mortals alike would shape the destiny of the world. With their rule now secure, the Olympians turned their attention to the world of mortals. Though humans had been granted fire by Prometheus, they still lived in chaos, scattered across the land without laws, civilization, or protection. The gods descended from Olympus and began to shape the world in their image. Zeus, the Sky Father, established divine laws, ensuring that both mortals and gods knew their place. Poseidon, lord of the seas, raised islands and crafted great rivers, giving the earth its form. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, taught mortals the secrets of agriculture, so that they would no longer live as mere wanderers. Athena, the wise and warlike daughter of Zeus, brought forth the knowledge of strategy, craftsmanship, and wisdom. Apollo and Artemis, twin gods of the sun and moon, watched over the balance of day and night. Aphrodite spread love and desire, weaving the fates of mortals and immortals alike. But not all gods sought to build. Ares, the god of war, reveled in battle and bloodshed, stirring conflicts among mortals wherever he walked. Hades, ruler of the underworld, remained distant, watching as the spirits of the dead entered his domain, where they would be judged and sent to their eternal resting places. As the gods shaped the world, they also laid the foundations for their own legacies. They took mortal lovers, creating heroes whose deeds would be sung for eternity. Among these would be the warriors, kings, and demigods, whose fates would intertwine with the will of Olympus. The Titans had ruled the cosmos for countless ages before their fall. Now the Olympians reigned in their place. But would their rule last forever? Or were they, too, destined to one day be overthrown? For now, Olympus stood unchallenged. But even gods are not immune to the whispers of fate. Even as Zeus sat upon his golden throne, even as the gods ruled over the world, there was something that even the mightiest among them feared. Fate. For the Titans had not merely been powerful beings of immense strength, they had been tied to the very fabric of destiny itself. And none were more feared than the Moiraith Fates. 3 sisters, older than the Olympians, older even than the Titans, spun, measured, and cut the threads of life. Clotho wove the thread, Lachesis measured it, and Atropos cut it. No god, no mortal, no Titan could escape their judgment, not even Zeus himself. The Fates had whispered their prophecies to Kronos before his fall, and he had failed to stop them. They had spoken of Typhon's rise, and that too had come to pass. And now, as the Olympians ruled over existence, the Fates remained silent, but their silence was not comforting. What was their next prophecy? Would the reign of the gods last forever? Or had the cycle of war, rise, and fall already begun anew? Zeus, though he hid his fears well, knew that even the gods were not beyond fate. The day would come when their thrones would be tested, just as the Titans had been. He had seen too many prophecies come true to ignore the whispers of the past. For now, however, Olympus stood unchallenged, and the gods, in their wisdom, folly, and passion, continued to shape the world as they saw fit. But deep beneath the earth, where no light reached, in the dark pits of Tartarus, the Titans still stirred, and the cycle was not yet broken. Though most of the Titans had been cast into the abyss of Tartarus, not all of them remained imprisoned. Some had been spared, either because they had not fought against Zeus, or because their roles in the cosmos were too important to erase. These Titans still walked the earth, lingering in the shadows of the new divine order, watching the Olympians build their world. Among them was Prometheus, still bound in his torment, suffering for the crime of giving fire to mortals. His punishment was eternal, yet he had one hope-own day. A hero would come, a mortal strong enough to break his chains. The prophecy was clear, but Zeus did not know when it would come to pass. Another Titan who remained free was Oceanus, the eldest of the Titans and ruler of the great cosmic river that encircled the world. Unlike his siblings, he had refused to take sides in the Titanomachy, choosing instead to remain neutral. Zeus allowed him to keep his domain, knowing that the waters were too vast to control without Oceanus's guidance. Then there was Helios, the Titan of the Sunday, who rode his golden chariot across the sky each day, bringing light to the world. Though he was not an Olympian, his duty was essential, and so he was left to continue his task. But the gods did not fully trust him. Would he remain loyal to the new order, or would he one day reclaim the power that had been taken from his kind? Some Titans, however, still whispered of rebellion. They had lost the war, but their spirit had not been broken. In secret places, in the farthest corners of the world, they plotted, waiting for the day when the gods would falter. The reign of the Olympians had begun, but the echoes of the Titans still remained. The Titans had lost, but their legacy had not been erased. Many of them had taken consorts before the war, and their children still roamed the world, possessing powers that rivaled even the gods. Some of these children accepted the rule of Olympus, but others held onto the old hatred, longing for vengeance against Zeus and his kin. Among the most dangerous of these was Echidna, the mother of monsters. She was not a Titan herself, but she had been born of the chaos left in the wake of the war. Her mate Typhon had been buried beneath Mount Etna, but she remained free, dwelling in the shadows and birthing creatures of terror beasts that would one day challenge both gods and mortals alike. Her monstrous children included the Nemean lion, whose hide was impenetrable, Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld, and the Chimera, a beast of fire and destruction. From the blood of the fallen giants, new threats arose. The Furies, goddesses of vengeance, stalked the earth, seeking to punish those who defied the ancient laws. The spirits of the Titans' fallen warriors roamed the world, whispering their hatred into the ears of mortals. But the greatest threat came not from monsters, but from the Titans' own children. Hecate, the Titaness of witchcraft and the night, still wielded power beyond mortal comprehension. Though she had sided with Zeus in the war, she was not bound to his rule. She walked her own path, untouched by Olympus, her loyalty shifting like the phases of the moon. Another powerful child of the Titans was Persephone, daughter of Demeter and Zeus's niece. Though she had been born under the new order, her fate would soon be entwined with the underworld, pulling her into the depths where the Titan spirit still lingered. The gods ruled the heavens, but the world was still filled with ancient forces beyond their control, and in time, these forces would rise again. Even as the gods ruled from Mount Olympus, they knew their reign was not absolute. Beneath the earth, in the deepest chasms of the underworld, the Titans remained imprisoned, but they were not silent. From his throne in the underworld, Hades watched over the gates of Tartarus, ensuring that none could escape. The Titans, though bound in chains, whispered of revenge, waiting for a moment of weakness. They could not break their bonds alone. But what if a Godor, a mortal, set them free? Zeus feared this possibility more than anything. He knew that if the Titans ever escaped Tartarus, the war would begin again. And so, he placed the mightiest of guards at its gates, the monstrous Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants who had once been imprisoned by Kronos. Now, they were his enforcers, standing watch over their former masters. But Zeus also knew that brute force was not enough. He needed to ensure that no god or mortal would dare attempt a rescue. And so, he spread stories of the horrors of Tartarus, warning all who would listen. He made it clear, any who sought to release the Titans would suffer a fate worse than death. Yet, despite these warnings, there were still those who dreamed of breaking the chains of the old gods. There were still those who believed that the Titans' rule had been more just than Zeus's tyranny. The shadows beneath Olympus grew darker, and the whispers of the past were never truly silenced. As the gods solidified their rule over the heavens and the earth, they turned their gaze toward mortals. Humanity had been growing, learning, and evolving ever since Prometheus had gifted them fire. But the gods did not trust mortals. They saw them as weak, unpredictable, and easily swayed. And yet Zeus knew that they could not be ignored. The Olympians needed mankind's worship, their devotion, their sacrifices. And so the gods began to intertwine their fates with mortals. Zeus, Poseidon, and other gods descended from Olympus to take mortal lovers, siring children who were neither fully god nor fully human. These demigods were stronger than ordinary men, blessed with divine power yet bound by mortal limitations. From these unions, heroes were born. Some would fight for the gods, proving themselves as champions of Olympus. Others would defy them, daring to challenge their authority. The world was no longer divided between gods and titans alone now. Mortals had become part of the great cosmic struggle. And as new heroes arose, so too did new challenges. Monsters, spirits, and hidden forces stirred, testing the strength of both gods and men. The age of divine rule had begun, but the age of heroes was just beginning. As the Olympian gods ruled from their thrones on Mount Olympus, the world below was shaped by mortals who were unlike any before them. These were not simple men and women, but beings who carried the blood of the god heroes destined for greatness. Perseus, Bellerophon, Atalanta, and Theseus. Each of them bore the mark of the divine, and each of them faced trials beyond mortal comprehension. The gods watched them closely. Zeus, ever wary of his own father's fate, feared that one day a mortal might rise to challenge Olympus itself. But he also knew that the gods could not rule alone. They needed champion heroes who could battle the monsters that still roamed the world, who could protect their temples and spread their worship among men. Among the first of these heroes was Perseus, the slayer of Medusa, whose deeds would echo through eternity. There was also Bellerophon, who tamed the winged horse Pegasus and sought to challenge the heavens themselves. For now, the heroes served them, but how long before one of them grew bold enough to defy them? Even as the gods celebrated their triumph over the Titans, they failed to see that the war was not truly over. The Olympians had secured their thrones, but the old world had not been completely erased. The Titans, though imprisoned, were not without influence. The curse of the Titans ran deep, weaving itself into the very fabric of existence. They had once shaped the cosmos, governed its laws, and controlled its primordial forces. Even now, with Zeus ruling from Olympus, the echoes of their power remained. Kronos, bound in the lowest depths of Tartarus, could not move, could not rise, could not reclaim his throne, but he could whisper. His voice drifted through the abyss, touching the dreams of mortals, planting thoughts in their minds, sowing the seeds of doubt about the gods who now ruled. Had the Titans truly been villains, or had Zeus simply rewritten history? Gaia, the great Earth Mother, had aided Zeus against Kronos, but she had never accepted the imprisonment of her children. She was the force that had given birth to the Titans, and her anger had never faded. The imprisonment of Kronos, the suffering of Prometheus, the defeat of the giants, each wound upon the Titans, was a wound upon Gaia herself, and she would not forgive. Far above, the gods built their temples, claimed their titles, and basked in their divine supremacy. But deep within the world, a storm was brewing, a slow, silent rebellion that none could yet see. The Titans had lost their war, but they had not lost their influence. The gods had taken their thrones, but they had not broken the cycle. And deep in the underworld, where the chains of Tartarus stretched endlessly into the abyss, something stirred. From the moment Zeus had cast down his father, he had known one terrible truth: his reign would not last forever. He had overthrown Kronos, just as Kronos had overthrown Uranus before him. And as the fates spun the thread of time, they whispered of a future where Zeus himself would be cast down. No god, no ruler, no kingdom was eternal. The cycle of power, once set in motion, could not be stopped. Zeus sought to avoid his fate in every way possible. He consumed the Titaness Metis, who carried within her a child destined to be greater than he. Yet from within him, Athena was born, fully grown and powerful beyond measure. He fought against Typhon, against the giants, against any force that threatened Olympus, but he could never silence the whispers of prophecy. The fates had seen the future. The time of the gods was not infinite. The first signs of the end were already appearing. Though Zeus sat upon his throne, mortals had begun to question the gods. They were no longer as fearful, no longer as devoted. New philosophies arose, speaking of reason, of destiny, of human will. Temples still stood, sacrifices were still made, but faith was beginning to shift, and as faith faded, so too did the gods. The Titans, chained and forgotten, saw this change, and though they could not act yet, they knew their time would come again. For even gods could not escape the cycle of power, and Zeus, for all his might, could not silence fate. Far below Olympus, beyond the realm of the living, the underworld stood in silent defiance of the gods above. Hades, the ruler of the dead, had remained distant from the affairs of his brothers. He had played no part in the wars that shaped the heavens, taking his throne in the underworld without question or complaint. Yet even he knew that the rule of the Olympians was not as secure as it seemed, for in the deepest parts of his kingdom, beyond the rivers of Styx and Lethe, stood the gates of Tartarus. The Titans were not dead. They were trapped, bound in chains, held beneath layers of darkness and time. Yet their power had not been erased. They were still there, waiting, watching. Hades had always believed himself neutral in the affairs of the cosmos, but he was not blind. He saw the cracks forming. He felt the whispers in the darkness. If Zeus's rule was destined to end, what would happen next? Would a new god rise to claim his throne? Or would the old gods, the Titans, return to take back what had been stolen from them? No god could rule forever. Not Zeus, not Poseidon, not even Hades himself. And deep in Tartarus, the Titans waited for the right moment to remind the world of that truth. For all their power, the Titans remained bound. Their chains were ancient, forged by the will of Zeus himself. But one of them had never given up hope. Prometheus, unlike his kin, he had not fought in the war against the gods. He had foreseen the defeat of the Titans and had sided with Zeus. Yet, in the end, he had suffered just as they had. For the crime of giving fire to mankind, he had been chained to a lonely mountain, his body torn apart each day by an eagle, only to heal and suffer again. Yet Prometheus was not like the others. He had something that no other Titan had. He had knowledge. He had seen things even Zeus had not. He had glimpsed the future. He knew that Olympus would not last forever. He knew that the gods would one day fall, just as the Titans had fallen. And so, as he suffered, he waited. He waited for the one who would set him free. A hero, neither god nor Titan, but something else entirely. That hero's name would be Heracles. Zeus had fathered many children, but none were like Heracles. Born of a mortal woman, yet possessing the blood of a god, Heracles was stronger than any man before him. His deeds would shape history. His name would be remembered for eternity. Yet from the moment of his birth, Hera sought to destroy him. She sent serpents to his crib, but even as an infant, Heracles crushed them with his bare hands. She cursed him with madness, forcing him to commit terrible deeds, and she burdened him with 12 impossible labors, each designed to break him. But Heracles would not break. Through trial after trial, he proved himself greater than any mortal, greater even than some gods. He slew the Nemean lion, defeated the Hydra, tamed Cerberus, and conquered the trials set before him. Yet his greatest act would not be one of war, but one of defiance. As he journeyed through the world, he came upon a mountain where a Titan lay bound in torment. Heracles looked upon Prometheus, saw his suffering, and made a choice that would shake Olympus itself. He raised his club. He shattered the Titan's chains. For the first time in centuries, Prometheus was free. The gods trembled. Zeus had not foreseen this. The balance of power had shifted. The cycle was beginning again, and the Titans were watching. As the reign of the Olympians continued, the world below was shaped by heroesmen and women whose fates were intertwined with the gods. Among them, none was greater than Heracles, the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcmene. From the moment of his birth, Hera despised him. He was a living reminder of Zeus's betrayal, and she sought to destroy him at every turn. She sent snakes to his crib, but even as an infant, Heracles crushed them in his tiny hands. She cursed him with madness, forcing him to commit terrible acts that would haunt him for the rest of his days. And she burdened him with 12 impossible labors, each designed to break him. But Heracles did not break. He faced monsters that should have been unbeatable: the Nemean lion, whose hide no blade could pierce; the Hydra, whose heads regrew each time they were severed; and Cerberus, the three-headed guardian of the underworld. He wrestled giants, tamed wild beasts, and ventured to the edges of the world itself. Through these trials, Heracles grew stronger. He was no longer just a man, he was something more. The gods watched him with awe, even fear. He had become greater than any mortal before him, a warrior whose strength rivaled even the divine. And then came the moment that would change everything. As Heracles journeyed through the lands, he came upon a lonely mountain where a chained figure suffered endlessly beneath the open sky. It was Prometheus, the Titan who had given fire to mankind, still bound in torment by Zeus's decree. The hero saw his suffering and made a choice that no mortal had dared before. He climbed the mountain, raised his mighty club, and shattered the chains of Prometheus. For the first time in centuries, the Titan was free. The gods trembled at this act. Zeus had not foreseen it. The cycle had begun again, the children of the gods rising, making choices beyond their father's control. Prometheus, though freed, did not seek revenge. He had already foreseen how this age would end. He had whispered prophecies before, but there was one he had never revealed. The reign of the Olympians would not last forever. And deep in the darkness of Tartarus, the Titans heard the echoes of their fallen brothers' release. The cycle was not yet broken. Beneath the world of mortals, beyond the lands of the living, the Titans remained imprisoned in Tartarus. Their chains were unbreakable, their prison eternal. But time was a strange thing in the realm of the divine. The Olympians believed they had won, that their victory over the Titans had been absolute. Yet deep within the abyss, the prisoners had not been idle. Kronos, once the king of the cosmos, had not forgotten his throne. Though bound, he still whispered through the void, reaching out to those who might listen. He could not break his own chains, but he could plant the seeds of his return. The Titans who had remained free, like Oceanus and Hyperion, heard his whispers. They did not act openly, for Zeus's wrath would be swift. Instead, they watched and waited, guiding mortals and gods alike toward a future where the balance of power might shift. But it was not only the Titans who listened. Some of the gods themselves, those who had never fully accepted Zeus's rule, began to question. Hades, confined to his underworld, looked upon Olympus with cold detachment. He had been denied his place among the gods, given only the domain of the dead. Did he not deserve more? In the temples of the world, mortal priests spoke of an ancient power, a time before Zeus, when other forces ruled the heavens. They whispered of Kronos not as a tyrant, but as a wise king who had been betrayed by his own son. These whispers grew, passing from generation to generation. Zeus, ever watchful, saw the signs. He knew the truth that no god would say aloud. He had won a battle, but he had not ended the war. The Titans were still there, still waiting, And one day, the world would tremble again. Though the Olympians ruled for what seemed like an eternity, Zeus knew what the fates had whispered. The reign of the gods, like that of the Titans before them, would not last forever. It would not happen in one great war. As with the Titanomachy, it would not come from a single battle. As with Typhon, it would come slowly over the ages as the belief in the gods faded. The gods were tied to mankind's worship. As long as men prayed to them, sacrificed to them, built temples in their honor, Olympus stood strong. But mortals were fickle creatures. They changed, they grew, they questioned. New philosophies arose, ones that placed reason above divine power. Some mortals no longer feared the wrath of the gods. They no longer sought omens or prophecies. The flame of faith began to flicker. Hera, once the mighty queen of Olympus, found fewer temples raised in her name. Poseidon, lord of the seas, watched as sailors spoke of new gods who protected their voyages. Even Zeus, the king of all, felt his power wane as fewer mortals looked to the sky in awe. The gods had once feared the Titans. Now, they feared something far greater being forgotten. And so, the gods who had overthrown the Titans began to fade, just as their predecessors had before them. The cycle continued. The Olympians did not vanish all at once. They did not fall in battle or meet some grand, tragic fate. They simply faded. Their temples crumbled. Their statues were worn by time. The world changed, and with it, the gods lost their grip on power. Zeus, once the mightiest force in the cosmos, felt his name whispered less and less. Poseidon's seas still raged, but no sailors prayed to him before their journeys. Hades ruled the dead, but fewer and fewer mortals imagined his underworld. And then, one by one, the gods left. Some withdrew into the shadows, content to let the world move on without them. Some, like Apollo and Athena, chose to walk among mortals in disguise, watching the world change. And some, like Zeus himself, simply vanished into legend, their names reduced to myths and memories. But the world did not end. Mortals thrived. They built empires. They wrote stories. They conquered the stars. And though they no longer prayed to Olympus, they never truly forgot. The Titans had fallen. The gods had ruled. And in the end, both were lost to time. But perhaps, somewhere beyond the veil of the known world, they still wait. Perhaps, one day, when the stars align and the world calls their names once more, the gods and the Titans will return. The Olympians had ruled for what seemed like an eternity. Their names had been carved into temples, spoken in prayers, and sung in hymns. But as centuries passed, as new beliefs and civilizations rose, their power began to wane. They had not been defeated in war, but they were being erased by time itself. Yet even as their worship faded, some gods refused to vanish. Some, like Hermes and Dionysus, wandered the earth in disguise, blending among mortals, watching history unfold. Athena and Apollo, gods of wisdom and prophecy, whispered their knowledge into the minds of philosophers and poets, ensuring that their influence lived on even as their statues crumbled. But not all gods were content to simply fade into legend. Hecate, the goddess of magic and the crossroads, never abandoned her place in the shadows. Unlike the other Olympians, she had never fully embraced the new order, and she had never been tied to Olympus. Even as temples fell and mortals turned away from the gods, Hecate's name continued to be spoken in secret. Those who practiced magic, those who sought forbidden knowledge, those who whispered to the spirits of the night, they still called upon her. Nyx, the primordial goddess of the night, had never bowed to Zeus. She existed before the Olympians, before the Titans, before the very concept of time. Even Zeus himself had feared her power. While the gods of Olympus faded, Nyx remained untouched. And then there were the Titans. Though most were still imprisoned in Tartarus, bound by chains forged in the earliest days of creation, some of them had escaped the fate of their brethren. Oceanus, the great river that encircled the world, still flowed, untouched by Olympus's decline. Theia, mother of the sun and moon, still watched over the celestial bodies she had given birth to. Mnemosyne, the keeper of memory, ensured that even if the gods themselves were forgotten, their stories would never disappear. But the one who posed the greatest threat to Zeus's fading rule was Kronos himself. Though trapped in the depths of Tartarus, Kronos was not dead. He was waiting. For what? No one could say. Perhaps he knew that Zeus's time would one day end. Perhaps he had foreseen that, like himself, his son would one day be cast down by the flow of time. Even in chains, Kronos was still a king, and time itself had not yet spoken its final word. There was one final prophecy, one that had never been revealed to the Olympians, one that even the fates had spoken of only in whispers. It was the prophecy of the end. Zeus had spent eternity fearing what he could not control. He had overthrown Kronos, had crushed Typhon, had defeated the giants, and had ruled Olympus with an iron fist. But there was one thing he could never defeat: time. The gods had ruled the world, but the world had moved on without them. No war, no rebellion, no enemy had destroyed them, only the slow, inevitable march of change. The fates had seen it long before Zeus was even born. They had spun the threads of destiny and had seen the end of all things. They had whispered of the day when no more prayers would be spoken, when the last temple would crumble, when the last mortal would forget the names of the gods. And they had seen what came after. No one knew if Zeus had heard this prophecy, if he had chosen to ignore it, or if he had simply refused to believe it. But deep in the underworld, Hades knew. He had seen the spirits of the dead grow fewer and fewer as belief in the gods waned. He had watched as the power of Olympus slowly faded, even as Zeus continued to sit upon his golden throne. And Kronos knew too. The king of the Titans, still bound in Tartarus, had learned patience over the centuries. He had waited for his moment once before, and he would wait again. For he knew the truth. The gods and the Titans were not so different. One had ruled, then fallen. The other had ruled, and now faced the same fate. The cycle had not been broken. It had simply begun again. And when the last mortal forgot the name of Zeus, when Olympus was nothing more than a ruin, when time had wiped away the last traces of the gods, what would remain? Kronos did not know, but he would be there to find out. Time is a circle. Long before the Olympians, the Titans ruled. Before the Titans, the primordials shaped the cosmos. And before them, there was only chaos. The gods believed they had won, but in truth, no one ever wins. The world forgets, but it also remembers. Stories never truly die. Names that are whispered in the dark are still names. Forgotten temples still hold echoes of old prayers. And deep within the fabric of reality itself, something lingers: the memory of gods, the remnants of a power that once shaped the world. Perhaps the Olympians would one day return. Perhaps the Titans would rise again. Perhaps a new force, something never seen before, would take their place. But one thing was certain: the cycle would never end. It had happened before. It would happen again. And when the stars aligned, when the right moment arrived, when time had turned upon itself once more. The Titans, the gods, the world itself would begin again. And so, our journey through the age of the Titans comes to an end, but their story lingers, echoing through time like whispers on the wind. The Titans ruled before the gods, shaping the world with their immense power. Though they were cast down, their presence was never truly erased, their legacy woven into the fabric of existence itself. As you drift into sleep, let your mind wander through the forgotten realms of ancient myth. Imagine the great battles fought among the stars, the rise and fall of cosmic rulers, and the eternal cycle of creation and destruction. The Titans may have been defeated, but their influence remains, waiting in the depths of time, in the shadows of memory. You are safe, at peace, resting within the rhythm of history itself. Let your thoughts settle like the dust of forgotten ages. The story continues, in the dreams of those who remember, in the legends passed from one age to the next. Thank you for allowing me to guide you on this journey. May you find comfort in the vastness of time, in the knowledge that every story, no matter how ancient, is never truly lost. Sleep well, and let the Titans rest with you.